Good morning and welcome to my garden. This is the vegetable side of contour 2 on the north, and it's going to be my potato bed this year. I prepared it with horse manure, mushroom compost, worm castings and straw. And there's also biochar in there. So it's well prepared, and I've let it sit for probably a month, maybe a month and a half. I'm just going to start planting from one end. I don't know that I'll fill the whole bed. I think the bed's about 16 metres. I watched a video made by someone who experimented with different ways of planting potatoes. His most productive way of growing potatoes was buried 6 inches in the soil. He never had to hill them up. They just grew very well and produced a lot of potatoes, far more than any other method he experimented with. So that suits me just fine. I've put a lot of layers on here, so they all sit above the hard ground. So it should be pretty easy for me to bury the potatoes in here, and it'll be equally easy for me to harvest them without having to dig down into the hard ground. Oh, it's a glorious autumn afternoon here in southeast Queensland. I'm really enjoying the warmth and the wet that we've had. It's getting a little chilly in the mornings though, and it's not my favourite, but that's okay. I'm not sweating to death every day. This is my potato patch. I've planted a number of different types of potatoes here. Some of them are looking like they're coming to the end. Others are still growing. So my experiment in this bed was not to hill up the potatoes, but instead to plant them deep when I first planted them. I planted them at least 6 inches deep. It had actually occurred to me, with the amount I was hilling up around my potatoes, that perhaps I had hilled them up to the point where there weren't enough leaves to act as they are supposed to. They take the carbon dioxide, the sunlight, and they photosynthesize to make the glucose for the plant to consume. And if I've buried most of the leaves, are they getting enough sunlight? Are they able to photosynthesize enough food for the plant? I don't know. So that'll be the experiment that I will learn about here. I will need to prune this poinciana back. It's putting quite a lot of shade on the potato bed, and potatoes need their full sun if they're going to grow and produce well. These stems look really tall. I'm really looking forward to seeing if the plants produced a lot of potatoes under the ground or whether they still needed to be hilled up more. These are the potatoes I'm starting with. These are Desiree potatoes. I had purchased them to eat, but they have sprouted beautifully. And I know it's early in the season, but I thought I'd get started early by planting these. Last year I planted potatoes a lot later, and I didn't have a lot of success with them. I want to do much better this year. I'm going to bury these about the depth of my fork, which is about 40 centimetres. And then I won't have to hill them up. Hilling them up created quite a lot more work for myself last season, so I'm glad not to do it this season. Now, when I harvested potatoes last season, there were no potatoes on the stem at this height. Interestingly, when I harvested them last season, I did not find any potatoes growing lower than the initial seed potato too. And I'm getting close to all the rocks down there, so if I go any deeper, it'll be too hard to harvest. So that's as deep as I'm going to plant them this time. This first batch of potatoes that I planted is starting to brown off, and the plants are just starting to look a little bit sad, but there's still a lot of green on the plants. I don't think it's time to harvest yet. On request of my daughter, I'm harvesting these potatoes here at the end. The plants are dying off, so we're going to harvest these ones here that have died off. Now, these were Desiree, and this is all I've got from this particular plant, which is about what I've been getting. That's about double the harvest. I've come to the conclusion that this bed really needs some fertiliser. Okay, as I'm digging this up, I'm very pleased to see the charcoal in here. That'll be doing good things for the soil. And I have noticed there have been some roots that have been growing in the charcoal. It's the other thing I found. How's that for a little bit of chicken dinner? These curl grubs are very useful at breaking down wood. They're part of God's cleanup crew that chew up the dead and dying branches that we have. I used to have my chop and drop row along here before I put soil on here and turned it into a garden. That curl grub is eating the wood that was underneath here as part of my chop and drop row. And he's very healthy, which means he's doing a good job of breaking down the soil. But I like making friends with my chookies, so he'll go to the chooks anyway. You get all sorts of beauties in soil that's got the right amount of organic matter in it. How's this for a little garden worm? It's not bad size. I've seen thicker ones around, but he certainly looks happy and healthy. Put him over here so I don't squash him while I'm digging. Okay, I've harvested this first batch of potatoes. So this was the first row. This was growing closest to the edge of the garden. It's actually got the 2 biggest potatoes out of the entire harvest, but only 4 potatoes. You can see there are some little potatoes growing here. The plant was pretty much dead. There was no benefit to leaving that in the ground. And this one, it had more life in it, but there's no way in the world that was going to grow more potatoes. Looks to me like this is a seed potato. You can see it's just mush. So all the nutrition has been drained out of that potato. And this one, again, the seed potato, it's jelly mush. And that one did a bit better. So yeah, I've learnt my lesson. I'm going to start fertilising my potatoes. In fact, I will fertilise the rest of the planted ones now. Even though they're probably mostly too far along, I'm not going to be able to expect a lot of improvement in the harvest from these ones that are already growing like this, but I can try and see what happens. I've got some potatoes that I've planted here. These should benefit from the nutrition I put in, and any that I plant up that way further will too. So this is the fertiliser I'm going to put on the potatoes. It's an organic blend of essential plant minerals, including trace elements, microbes and soil conditioners. So I'm hoping this will serve me well. There's your breakdown. And I'm just going to use my cup and just put a cup around every plant. Planting some more potatoes this morning on contour 2 on the north. It seems the layers underneath here have dried out, although I've been watering them at least once a week. I won't be watering it today though, because we have a cyclone about to cross the coast. So I expect to have large amounts of rain. I have some Sebago potatoes, which have grown some eyes. I've decided to use my power planter to dig the holes. Problem with that, the straw is getting all wrapped around it. Now I did pull the straw away, pulled it all the way back like that. Even just one little bit of straw that wrapped around the auger has wrapped the whole lot around it. Either I'm going to have to completely remove the straw from this section of bed before I complete the planting task, or I'm just going to have to go back to using hand tools. And my dodgy elbow is struggling with that this morning. So I've ended up burying these potatoes about the length of my glove. So that's probably about 20 centimetres down. That's still above the level of natural ground, so it should be fairly easy to dig. Remembering that I don't want to be piling these potatoes up, hilling them up like I have in the past. I'm just going to try and bury them deep and hope that I get good harvest from that. Update on my potatoes. So these first ones, they're looking like they're starting to die off. Pretty sure they haven't been in the ground long enough for them to be ready to harvest. I've just dug up the potatoes that were planted here. And this is my harvest. Now, it's not many, considering I would have planted 8 good-sized potatoes there. Not satisfied. Not satisfied with that harvest at all. And these are some Dutch cream potatoes. They were larger, so I only got 4. These have smaller sprouts on them. I've chosen to plant them now because we have some lovely overcast weather and 3 days of rain promised, which should mean after some good rain, I won't need to water these for a week or two because this ground will stay nice and moist. These ones are also starting to brown. I have to wonder whether that is something to do with nutrients in the soil, or I have to wonder if it's partly because this poinciana is creating so much shade for the potatoes. I do need to chop that down, prune it down to a size where it's not going to be throwing shade, but in the meantime these potatoes may be suffering from it. I did better on this side. That's my harvest from this row over here, and it was all in the one row beside the parsley. What I'm not too impressed with is how many I damaged by harvesting them with a fork. Now, I know when I started this experiment, the experiment was about seeing if I could get more potatoes by planting the potatoes in deep. The problem I see with this way of doing it is that when you dig up the potatoes, it's really hard to not damage them. So when I planted last season, I had them in raised garden beds, which I would just pull aside and then dig the soil from there with my little hand trowel and my hands. But here where I've buried it down deep, I have to dig it with a digging fork. Either that or drag all the soil off the bed. But that's a lot of moving soil, and I was trying to get away from that. But that is a better harvest. I noticed this one's already green from being very close to the surface. Perhaps if we'd have been home over the last growing season, I could have put grass mulch over the top of them so they didn't go green from the exposure to the sunlight. These are Desiree. These have got some rather large sprouts on them. However, there are a couple with no sprouts. So I might actually arrange it so the biggest sprouted ones are on the left and the smaller sprouts are on the right, and just see how they grow differently. As I'm planting my Desiree potatoes, I have found one. I won't be planting this, it is starting to rot. I don't want to introduce that rot into the ground. I'm really disappointed to discover I've got so few potatoes, but I'm encouraged to see the size of my earthworms. They're significant. So with a few of those in the garden will be healthier. But why did I not get any potatoes? So this is the area of the garden that was under shade from that poinciana, so that it would have a lot of shade for most of the day. Particularly when we got to winter, which is when the potatoes were being grown, the poinciana shaded all of this part. You can see I've got 2 potatoes there from this 1 metre square patch. Just really discouraging. So what do I think has gone wrong with this potato harvest? I don't know. I know I was burying them, 6 to 8 inches under the ground so that I didn't have to build them up. Maybe some of the potato types really struggled to get their leaves up to the surface to get sunlight before they could produce tubers. I had improved the garden bed with horse manure and worm castings and mushroom compost and spoiled silage and biochar and more worm castings. I do know that the poinciana was shading them terribly, and I did remove that when I had the opportunity. I don't know, this growing potato business is really frustrating. I want to keep trying. I'd love to grow my own potatoes. I'd love to grow all my own vegetables, actually. And so I'll keep trying. I don't know what I'll try different next season, but I've got a couple of months to think about that first. I have some Kipfler potatoes to plant here, so that'll come next. I am thrilled. After having so many unprofitable harvests of potatoes, I have just picked my Kipfler potatoes, and that is such a pleasing harvest. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these plants. Okay, so you can see this plant. This is a seed potato, so that's a potato I planted from which the plant got its energy from when I first planted it. I'm surprised that it's so intact. Often with, for example, Sebago potatoes, it's completely turned to mush. So clearly that potato had more to offer and it was able to support good growth. And this is what we see. I have never had this much produce. So it's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times what I planted. That's really good going. I'm really happy with that. Here's another example of a potato plant. There's the seed potato. This one's a bit mushy. It's still pretty solid compared to some I've seen. And you can see the potatoes on it. One thing I'm interested in, these potatoes had really long stolons between them. I haven't seen that before. Here's another plant. There's your seed potato. And you can see the main plant coming out of that there. And it goes up there up the branch. Might have had 2 main plant branches coming off it. All these potatoes from it. And this one again, the seed potato. Now this one's a lot more mushy. And it has some great 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, easy 8 times what I planted there. And look at this one. This one has produced so well. In fact, that might be 2 separate potatoes, 2 separate plants. I don't know, but I think that one came from one. And this is another. So I'm really pleased with that. These are Kipfler potatoes. And they have produced by far the best harvest of anything I've grown here. Now this particular harvest of potatoes was grown in a mixture of horse manure, mushroom compost, spoiled silage, worm castings. So all of that was put on the garden bed before I planted the potatoes. The potatoes I grew down here suffered from shade from this poinciana, but you can see I dropped all this. So these potatoes here didn't have that problem. I am thrilled to see the harvest of that. I'm really, really pleased. We've done much better with the Kipfler potatoes. I should get them out of the sun before they go green too. But I'm very pleased by this harvest. It's so nice to actually have a harvest that was worth it. Lots of potato salad coming my way. I've noticed a few of them rotting. I had started watering this garden, and I guess that hasn't been good for the potatoes. There are quite a number of them that have started to rot. And so this is a reminder to me that, yeah, companion planting is good, but it's also important to plant similar things at similar times to be harvested at the same time. Now this garden bed here is 16 metres long. That makes it really hard to harvest the whole bed in one go. That's a lot of bed. Maybe I need to rotate my smaller beds through potatoes and leave the longer beds for brassicas that need to grow all year round. This is something I'm going to have to look at. Perhaps even I'm going to have to chop this watering system in half so that I can have that half on and this half off. Lots to think about. But again, Kipfler potatoes have been my best producer in this garden, and I am grateful.